years and was a recipient of a summer undergraduate research grant to work in the Delta Lab with Dr. Liz Gerber and Dr. Julie Hui on exploring equitable maker spaces. I had the distinct pleasure of working with Wendy in the development. I didn't have anything to do with what she was doing because she's far smarter than I. But I got to play the very exciting and fun role of helping her to kind of think through the things that she wanted to do and have the wonderful job of being able to give her money to be able to do that. So she and I stayed in contact after she graduated, and she invited me to her dissertation defense presentation back in December. And I was blown away by what she's done and everything she's grown into. And I was like, I think I'll sense me an Expo Keynote speaker. So I quickly reached out and got her. And she was supposed to be here in person, but bosses make you go to your jobs. And so we had to pivot. So I'd like to, her talk will be my human-centered approach to research. Wendy, thank you.
Thank you so much, Peter. Thank you, everyone. Yes, I am so sad that I cannot be there in person today. We had everything planned out, and then Google returned to office. So I am currently in Mountain View, calling in from work. But I am so excited to be here today. Thank you, Peter, for that introduction. And I'm so glad that we have stayed in touch throughout. So it is such an honor to have been invited to give this talk because many years ago, I was an undergraduate researcher having just received the summer undergraduate research grant, my summer of my junior year. And I don't know if we had this ceremony back then. I don't know if we had like food and pictures and all these things, but I'm glad that now it is this big event. And today I'm here to give you a brief overview of my research career through the lens of the people and the humans that have been part of my journey, and also through the lens of the people that I've had the privilege of learning from through my research. And so I'm going to structure it as a little bit of like the people that I engage with, and then go a little bit into like the kind of research that I've been doing and how I got to where I am today. So the first human I'm going to tell you about, you might know, is Dr. Savetta. So many years ago, I remember sitting in Peter's office and asking him, what does it even mean to do research? And why do we do research? And how do we do research? So I would sit in at the office of undergraduate research with Peter in his office and brainstorm what are the questions I have about the world and how do I go about answering those questions? And like he said, how do I get funding to help answer those questions? So that led to my first project that I did in the Delta Lab. As an undergraduate researcher with my mentors, Liz Gerber and Julie Hui. And my question that I had was, how do we create more equitable university maker spaces? And what does it mean for people to feel like it is an equitable university maker space? And so I did research, I did interviews, I went out into the world and I talked to people, I talked to humans, I focused on the role of gender in maker spaces. And so I started to narrow down my question, not just broadly, like what is equity, but what is equity for certain people, and what does equity look like in these certain settings? And I am so proud to say that that work from my undergraduate year of doing this research is actually one of my most highly cited papers that came out of this curiosity about the world, and I answered by talking to people that I just met through different university engagements and maker spaces. And so that led to this other really important person in my career, which is Julie. So Julie was a PhD student at the time at Northwestern and is now a professor at University of Michigan. And Julie helped me ask questions about what it meant to publish and to develop research, a research plan, but also what it meant to pursue this as a career. So at the time, I wasn't sure what kind of scholar and what kind of research I wanted to do. I just knew that I had questions and I wanted to find a community to help answer those questions. So Julie and Liz helped me apply to different graduate programs, and I ended up at a department I had never heard about, I did not know much about, called Human-Centered Design and Engineering. So I started grad school in Seattle, having never left Chicago. So I grew up in Chicago. I went to school in Chicago, then I went to school at Evanston, and I moved to Seattle, ready to be a researcher. Like, what does it mean to be a researcher? And what am I going to learn in grad school to be an effective researcher, but also to help get some of these answers that I had about people and about equity and about engineering. And so that led to me meeting my two advisors during my PhD. And these two people really helped me understand, how do you read research with a lens of understanding the current knowledge that exists in the world, but also how do you engage with research through a critical lens? And they gave me a big, I think, confidence boost to say, like, I had the ability to not just take in information, but also question information and question why that knowledge was out there, and question how I could present new knowledge, or I could present different knowledge. And that's where I got a lot of my critical lens on the work that currently exists. And they also helped me learn about what it meant to write research and what it meant to produce scholarship about the kinds of questions I was doing. So one big word that I love to use now, only because it means so much to me, is I developed my epistemology. And so I developed my way of knowing, where I wanted to propose answers to questions of equity in design and in human computer interactions and in engineering. But I wanted to figure out what were the right tools to help answer these questions that I had, that were fundamentally about sociocultural factors coming into account in these engineering and human-centered design and design settings. So my epistemology and my way of knowing was to foreground people. Like, I really wanted to do my research through the lens of, what are people telling me, and how do I give back the information that I'm learning from this research to people again. And so that led me to do a lot of research with different groups of people. During my PhD, I did co-design with children and families. I got to do work with families in LA. I got to do work with families in Seattle. I got to work with families from Latinx backgrounds, from East African backgrounds. I got to work in computing education settings, but also in playful learning settings. I got to work in the home and in the classroom. And that's what led to my dissertation that Peter mentioned. And as I was doing all of this too, now I've developed, like, okay, what kind of questions do I have about the world? How do I help answer those questions? What's my lens of taking on research and answering those questions? And then it came a point in my career where I was asking, like, well, where do I want to do this research? Do I want to do it as an academic in university settings? Do I want to do this research in the nonprofit space? Do I want to do this research in the industry setting? And that led to another person I met at a conference, another human. And Erica Prosper is a person that works at a company called HEB in Texas. And I met her at a research conference where I was just presenting my work, actually on co-design with families. And she said, do you want to come work and do research in industry? I was like, what does that mean? Like, the only thing I had known was doing research in academia, because I had done it as an undergrad and I had done it at University of Washington. And that experience working with Erica taught me a lot about translating my research into practice. So I had developed a lot of different skills to do research and plan research. But then it was like, well, what are they going to do with this research? What does it mean for the company to take this up? Or what does it mean for us to translate this into the industry setting? So that led me down a path of exploring this in different places. So I did work with nonprofits like the Joan Gans Cooney Center in Sesame Street. I did work at Facebook. I did work in different nonprofit settings, and just these different experiences. And then the other human that led me here today is, I was at the end of my PhD, and I was thinking about doing research and connecting with people. And I had developed a really strong community of people that I did research with, and that influenced a lot of my thinking. So I tweeted, I'm on the job market. I'm looking for a job. Like, does anyone have any people that they know? And someone at Google reached out back almost a year ago now on Twitter and said, why don't you consider doing research at Google? So I am currently a user experience researcher. I work on the search team, so Google Search, and I work on what is the future of search for people. Like, what does this look like to design search for people on mobile devices, for people on desktop, for people in different settings? And that's what I love about my job today, is I get to keep asking the same questions I had back in Peter's office of, like, how do I do research? How do I find the methods and the tools? How am I critical about the kind of information I'm generating and the knowledge I'm presenting? How do I translate that information so that it's useful and helpful for people and teams? And that led me to, I think, some three lessons that I just want to share with you all today. And one of them is putting myself in spaces where I was surprised by people around me. I didn't know my journey was going to take all these pivots, but it was people that helped introduce me to these new settings and these new environments and these new questions that I didn't even know I could explore as a full-time career. Surrounding yourself with people who will open up doors you didn't even know existed. Like Peter, many years ago, opened up the door of research as a career for me. And remembering the importance of highlighting not just what you found, but what people can use your research insights for, and who you do that work for. So I do research for the opportunity to share people's stories, to redefine who gets to produce knowledge, and to promote alternative ways of knowing and being. And I had no idea I could make a career out of asking questions about the world, going out into the world to seek answers with people, and then sharing back what I learned. So that's, to me, what it means to do research.
Thank you so much. So while we have a supersonic awesome person here, does anyone have any questions that I can kind of relate? If sound is weird, but I can relate. Does anyone have any questions for Wendy about her career or work that she's done? Yes, Miriam.
Hi, Wendy. My question is, can you talk a little bit about how you know what to do on a day-to-day basis? Have a team that you come up with questions with, or are you making those decisions on your own?
So she asked, did you hear that, Wendy, or not?
No, can you repeat it for me, please?
Okay. How do you decide what to do on a day-to-day basis? Like, do you have a team or are you on your own? Like, what does it mean to do your job?
Yeah. So I am still a noogler, which is what Google considers new to Google. I've been here for 6 months. And currently, to decide what I work on, I work with people to help prioritize what are the questions we have for our team. And then I get to decide and say, like, okay, given that there are these 10 top priorities and questions we have about this product, like, which one should we go forward with? And as I'm deciding which one, I'm thinking, like, what am I going to learn from this one study that then I can do in the next study and I can implement and like build on that previous one. I'm also thinking, okay, is this the right time to be asking these questions? And then I'm also working closely with my manager to figure out, like, do we already have existing research on this? And how could I translate it to our setting? Or do we have to do new research? So that's where I'm at right now. I am currently doing research that is very foundational. So I get to explore and say, like, okay, I'm doing this project. And now, like, oh, maybe this opens up a path this way. And then presenting that to my team that I work with and my manager and saying, like, do you think this is a good path to go down? Because I have the opportunity currently to be able to do that.
Great, thank you. I think one of the things that's amazing about the story that Wendy tells us all is that people tend to think, particularly undergrads, because you only like know what you've been able to see, is that very often research is equated with graduate school. And like, oh, if you do research, it's because you want to get a PhD and you want to be an academic the rest of it. And it's just about inquiry. And so she did go to graduate school, but now she's doing other things that there's so much possibility within it, which is really exciting. Yes.
My question, Wendy, is how does one transition from mechanical engineering into a people-oriented career path?
So the question is, how does one transition from mechanical engineering into people?
Yeah, this all really started on the Northwestern campus. I was an undergraduate student in mechanical engineering, and I was wondering about the things that we were figuring out how to build and the forces and the products and like how do you bring the product to life, and how do you manufacture it and 3D printing it and all these other things. And in the back of my head, I was asking, well, who's going to use this? Like, why are we building this? Where could this go? Like, what uses could it have, but also what misuses could it have? And that's how I started asking questions about design. And then I did the Siegel undergraduate, or the certificate, I think, the design certificate through Siegel. And then I met Dr. Liz Gerber and I met Dr. Julie. And then when I was applying to graduate school, I applied to a range of programs. So I applied to engineering education programs. I applied to specific mechanical engineering programs. And then I applied to human-centered design and engineering, which was a gem to find because of how interdisciplinary it was. So how did I get from mechanical engineering to people? I think people were always there. I think people are always there, even though it wasn't in the title of my undergraduate degree. I had questions about people throughout, and thankfully I found programs that supported helping me answer those questions.
Great. So one last round of applause for Wendy. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we look forward to staying in touch and learning about the amazing things you will continue to do.
Yes, congratulations
next
to
week-
everyone.
Thank you.